to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, July 2nd here. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by Matthew Betz and back from Hawaii, Mike Wright.
Aloha, as we the locals say.
That was great, Mike.
What's up, everybody?
How was your trip, man?
Thank you.
Did you have a good time?
That place is great. I don't know. We're all suckers. I'll tell you that much. Living here, working. It's dumb. Let's move to the beach.
You guys are the owners, so if you wanted to, 2/3 of you were there at the island. You could have made an executive decision.
We have one really strong holdout, but I think we're changing his mind here recently.
Who's the holdout?
Oh, come on. Come on.
Jason has said to me so many times, like, dude, we'd move tomorrow if we could. Like,
yeah.
So it goes without saying who that other person is. But yeah, but Ballers, you guys had a good little vacation. Betz and I last week talked benches. Dynasty benches, the sexiest of all topics that you never need to go back and listen to.
Dude, talking about your Dynasty bench is so much more fun than talking. Just who cares about your starters? Like, grown up. Like, we talk about the benches, the nasty boys. I'm hit. It's almost nasty boys of summertime.
Oh,
right,
yes.
Kyle?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We did reference the previous Nasty Boys of Summer conversations we've had.
Oh, how did we do?
We had one hit rate over the last 2 or 3 years, but I did call myself out, Mike. I was like, remember Counts Ingram? Thinking that maybe, possibly he could make
Rico
the team.
was my guy last year.
Rico was the one hit.
He was the one.
Yeah. All right, yeah. Hey, do better.
But hey,
guys.
If you got Rico last year for free, I mean, he was a top 24 running back for the back half of the year. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, he was.
These are the tough conversations you got to have. Everybody loves the debate of Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. It's like, no, I want to know who the fourth string running back is to pick up and maybe get a start out of this guy.
Do we talk about news on this show?
we kind of dabble with it. So, hey, you know what? You're back. You can do whatever you want. So
good.
If you want to go,
I want to talk about a nasty boy. And I just look, this is just look. The news is Jonnu Smith was traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers because Arthur Smith has himself a fever. And that fever is to destroy any starting tight end on his roster because he's got to get Jonnu Smith in there to take all the snaps. Look, that was a massive update. The Ultimate Draft Kit, we got that thing in there pretty much immediately. And I mean, one of us even did the updates from 36,000 feet or wherever airplanes are flying. That would be Mr. Jason Moore, he's on his way back. And I was thinking through everything because it's such a massive change, right? That the second half of the season for the Miami Dolphins, the offense ran through HN and Jonnu Smith. And it was this short stuff. And, we're thinking about with the wide receivers, what's Miami going to do? Are they going to go back to that this year? And, on the surface, just the quick reaction, the gut reaction is, well, yeah, they're going to have to quite a bit. Maybe they make a move at tight end. There was been some rumors that they might not be done and they're going to try and add somebody. But naturally, if you take Jonnu away, there's not someone on this roster who can step up and do what Jonnu Smith does. Because for all the joking about Jonnu, he's a good NFL player. So the wide receivers are going to have to do something. And then it's like, could this possibly mean anything good from Malik Washington?
I knew that was where you were going to go.
Because I loved that dude. He fell in the draft. Like my personal scouting of him, just some dumb metrics that I think are important. He scored really well in those things. And I'm like, what round was he drafted in?
I believe it was 6.
I was going to say, I know it was day 3. I think it was 6th.
Yeah, it was a day 3. So, okay, round 6. And I mean, the guy did really nothing. 36 targets. He caught 26 of them for 223 yards. He didn't score. He was barely on the field. But I thought, dude, if they're going to have to go back to the wide receiver situation and, back a third guy kind of steps up, generally speaking, for the Miami Dolphins. Like, we had you have a tiny bit of Gesicki. I'm not saying like difference makers, but I don't know. Malik Washington, I think, is a nasty boy who probably not on your waiver wire, but at least take a peek because he might be there while everyone rushes to pick up whoever we think that, like, who's starting now for the Miami Dolphins at the tight end position. Who would you
project
pencil
right now?
in?
I think it is incoming guy they add to the roster, not Julian Hill. Like that's
right.
That's what I think it's going to be.
That's what I mean. We don't know who it is currently. And let me just peek at something real quick.
It's not Durham Smythe, who I want it to be, but he's on the Bears. He's actually making a lot of money.
He cannot come back.
No.
But it's like, so our lads. If you're out there, our lads is a fantastic depth chart resource out there. It's the one I go to most frequently. They have Farrell Brown projected as the starting tight end. This is what I mean. If we don't know who it is, Julian Hill. If you play on Sleeper, there's the trending section of players. Julian Hill has rocketed up, and so that just creates the world that we all. Oh, well, apparently it's Julian Hill. We don't know that. Like, who's it gonna be?
When you look at the target share, like the year before, 9% went to the tight end position. Last year was 27%. It was a drastic change. I think we're going to look back and say that was a blip on the radar of how this team functioned with lots of injuries and the lowest of ADOT imaginable. And then we're going to go back to this target share where 68% of the team's targets that was a top 3 mark in the league, went to the wide receiver. So I think Malik Washington is the play. I did look him up. Betz. Mike has him in Dino Jr. So maybe there's I know. I knew he was rostered. I didn't know who it was, but I figured it was Mike and Jason.
Yeah. I really do think, though, like, I mean, obviously, if Tyreek and Waddle are healthy and functioning the way that they're supposed to be in this offense and all those things, you're probably never going to be, like, comfortable starting Malik Washington, assuming he does win the wide receiver 3 job. But, like, if either of those guys is injured, do you feel like Washington could consolidate the routes over Nick Westbrook-Akine? Because he kind of has like this overlap of like the short area, not gadget role, but like quick hitters, get the ball in his hands, let him go to work kind of role. Whereas like Nick Westbrook-Akine is going to have, 17 targets and 6 touchdowns
touchdown or bust
this year because that's what he does. But I feel like he's like the contingency play on the stuff that Waddle and last year Jonnu and Tyreek did very well around the line of scrimmage. So I think that call out is really nice. Like Mike said, if he's out there, scoop him up. Everybody in fantasy world is talking about what this means for Achane and the wide receivers. But, nasty boys of summer, we're here. Pick him up if he's available.
You gotta sneak in. Look, everyone's waiting in line to get in the club. You gotta dress up. You gotta pretend you're a chef and you sneak in the back.
Now, Mike,
you show up and you're like, it was Malik Washington all along.
Did you hit the clubs
experience
on your vacation or not this time?
Did I hit? I hit the clubs.
You and the fam.
The club was my bed at 8 p.m. going to sleep.
Oh, I think Miami. We talked a little bit about Jalen Wright last week when we talked about benches. I just think it's going to be a fascinating team to project. And what do you think? And call your shot on Tyreek. Call your shot on Waddle, who I think all 3 of us like. And we look at last year and go, like, last year sucked. We're not saying it wasn't bad, but also don't abandon this guy. We'll talk about him today a little bit. I just think Miami, if you are bullish enough and you think that they can figure things out, they can push aside. Like, we're going to probably end up throwing aside most of their metrics. Like, when we compare year to year and go, okay, well, I'm not going to base their target share. I'm not going to base how they run their offense the exact same way they did last year. It's just going to function differently, I hope, or Mike McDaniel doesn't have a job.
And Tua, like, if they have to get back to high flying, it's, a couple years ago, it was like when Tyreek was on his run, Tua was very usable for fantasy football. And Tua actually, when he came back this past year, if I'm not mistaken, he had a run where he was actually like, if you had picked him up to stream him, he really helped you out. So if they go back, to the higher flying, at least higher flying, and not just this garbage around the line. What Betz you just posted is career low 6.1 ADOT for Tua. I mean, get that crap out of here. Let's fly.
Yeah, his last 3 years, 10.1, 8.1, 6.1. So obviously a little bit of an outlier. Not sure if that was protecting him from injury or just trying to hide the offensive line or what. They also had no run game last year. They really couldn't get it going.
Yeah.
And you think about like Tyreek Hill and Waddle, like they're so dangerous down the field if defenses have to respect the run. Last year, they really had no threat in the run game. So hopefully that changes this year. Get the offensive line a little bit more functional. Get Achane back to doing his stuff, and they could be fun. I could see the Dolphins like literally winning 10 games or 5, and I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Betz and I talked on the DFS and betting podcast about Tua leading the league in passing yards, something he did 2 years ago. And when you look at the betting markets, he's just way lower. But if you look at our projections in the Ultimate Draft Kit, across the board, the three of you guys have him pretty high. I think he's plus 2,200 bets was where it was at.
Yep,
so
that's what we took last week.
So it's a sneaky team. It's a team we're going to keep talking about all over. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking Dynasty wide receivers, talking about tiers. And I don't know if you guys are ready. We're not going to talk about every single one of these, but there are 50 wide receivers I have in today's doc. 50 of them, Mike. We're not going to talk about all of them, but let's get to it.
5 minutes per.
Dynasty Rankings.
All right, Jamar Chase, here we go. No, if we just like blitzkrieged all of them, it would be too much. I think the exercise that I want to go through with you guys is when I look at our rankings, which you can find in the Ultimate Draft Kit, you can find all of Mike's Dynasty rankings. I just want us to group certain players and ask the question, like, are we nervous about this rank? Are we nervous about this player where things could shift or change? And are we just assuming this is where this player hangs out? So last year, Marvin Harrison Jr., not just by us, but consensus was like a top 5 or 6 Dynasty wide receiver. He is outside of the top 12 for a lot of people's rankings. And that's sad.
Whoops.
It's really sad when I have him in a couple of leagues, and
oh, man,
we'll talk about him moving forward. But the process of creating tiers is a little different in Dynasty. We talk about them in our projections for 2025. You can find all of our tiers for redraft ranking. But in Dynasty, it's like every tier is not equal. Everybody's at a different stage in their career. We can have players that are right next to each other. Like, for instance, Terry McLaurin, who probably is going to get a contract extension, we hope he does, is kind of in this same tier where you have other guys like Jameson Williams right around him, DK Metcalf is right around him, George Pickens. They're at different stages of their career. So overall, would you guys say like tiering players in Dynasty is more of a, it's not exact. It's not an exact science.
Oh, it's definitely not exact because things change quickly. Like it's much easier to feel like you have a handle on one singular season. I mean, when I get players on my team, just like everyone else, I'm hoping I can get 3 good years from them on my Dynasty squad. But like life is crazy, man. Like stuff happens where like an injury here, an off the field thing that you could not possibly have predicted was going to happen, and then all of a sudden the value of this player for fantasy football is tanked. So yeah, I like tiering them more in terms of just like I've got my superstars on my team, and then I have my insurance running backs. I group players more like that type of an archetype. I don't have like an actual formula or percentage, but I mean that would be a pretty interesting thought experiment to go through. Of last year when I built my Dynasty team, I was really shallow at running back, so it was like I want this percentage of my bench dedicated to all insurance running backs because I know 1 to 2 of them will come in handy here, and they absolutely 100% did. Shout out to Jerome Ford until the final championship run there where he got hurt in the first quarter. But so it's like things like that. That's more of how I'm thinking about building my roster. I'm not like, okay, this is my wide receiver 3 here. Like, no, I got a group of guys that equal into that position.
Would you guys say, when I'm looking at some of these aging players where I'm like, I don't know where to put this dude, Terry McLaurin's who I mentioned earlier, but there's so much, like, I wrote this down, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes it's injuries that plague that a player's hit, and then it just slowly tanks their value. Michael Thomas in 2020 was the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. And you guys know the story of how that was just like, oh, maybe he's back. And you kept playing that game. Tyreek Hill was one of those guys where we knew he was getting older, but in his age 29 season, he was still a top 10 guy. Last year, he was kind of on that fringe wide receiver 1 territory, even in Dynasty at his age, where he was like, oh, well, this is still Tyreek Hill. Look how good he's been. And right now, on Keep Trade Cut, he is the wide receiver 33. And there's just massive drop off in perceived value, right? Like Tyreek Hill could still be good and still be good for a couple of years, but you don't know what you don't know. And so I just don't want us to hold so tightly some of these players. Now, this first tier we're going to talk about, and we won't talk about them very long. I'm not worried about any of these dudes. I'm not worried about what we have. Chase, who I would argue is in a tier of his own. I think there's no way I would ever trade away Chase, no matter what you throw at me. And then Jefferson, Neighbors, Lamb. So Betz, I'll start with you. Do you have Chase on his own and then these three?
I think the only difference for me in terms of Jamar Chase versus the next three guys, well, more just Jefferson versus Malik Neighbors. Like Jamar Chase has the contract, Joe Burrow. We feel incredible about that rapport and the continuity there in his role. Jefferson obviously is a superstar who's going to produce no matter what, but there is a range of outcomes that exist where JJ McCarthy is not great, and then we're kind of wondering what that looks like moving forward. And Malik Neighbors is a young superstar, so we feel great about his career arc and trajectory, but they don't really have a quarterback right now, it seems anyway. So I would say like that's the tiebreaker for me in terms of that kind of pecking order. Lamb obviously tied to Dak, so he's got the continuity, but I mean, Jamar Chase, 25 years old, just signed that massive contract extension. And like, you know, we all got excited again about T. Higgins and his contract, but there's like weird verbiage in there where like, I would not tie T. Higgins to the Bengals for more than 2 years. And there's a world that exists where in a couple of years, you know, Jamar Chase is still 27 years old and like the only option in town is a world that exists for Jamar Chase. So yeah, it's kind of nitpicking here at the top with these top four guys. They're all incredibly valuable. I would love to have any four of these guys. They are the top, you know, for a reason. They're all super talented and, you know, proven assets, I would say at this point.
I just can't imagine, no matter what season you're in, why you would want to trade away any of these players. No matter what, I mean, if you would get a package, and I know somebody out there is going to show me a screenshot later that said, hey, I got 38 first. Cool. But like at the end of the day, no matter what season you're in, you have a young wide receiver who's a stud. Even if you want to nitpick and look at CeeDee Lamb, who's 26 years old, it's like, I don't care. CeeDee Lamb's going to be good for 3+ years, 4 years, 5 years. And his value is not going to tank all of a sudden. Like he's an alpha. I have him on a dynasty roster and I just look at it sometimes and go, this is set in stone. Now, Mike, you have Chase and Lamb, so you're kind of...
I sure do.
You're sniffing your farts every single day about this, but do you guys agree with me? If you have these players, no matter what season in, I mean, someone has to literally go over the moon, but even then, it's like, what are you hoping to get in return? This is the best part of Dynasty. So if someone offered you the moon, Mike, would you take Chase? Or would you trade Chase?
It would be so incredibly difficult as Betz, you talk about. I'm going to look for a tweet. Someone showed me a Jamar Chase tweet that they put through, and it was the first time I've ever said, "Oh, I don't know, man. That's pretty intense going on, Jamar Chase."
I mean, we'll talk about this next tier in a second here. Just kind of a quick look ahead, though. It's like Puka and Brian Thomas Jr. and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, you would probably need, I don't know, obviously at least one of these guys, but like maybe two to do it, in my opinion, or like one of these guys and a projected like early first round pick, something like that. Like you're not moving him for a couple of wide receiver 2 quality players and like a couple seconds and a first. Like I don't want a package of, you know, dimes to equal $1. It just doesn't, right? It needs to be like a legit overpay to move off of these guys, which, I mean, I don't mind doing that in my leagues of like floating it out there and just seeing what people will do for for players like this, obviously people know that you need to take a lot to get them via trade, but sometimes people do crazy stuff, and at some point, nobody's untouchable, in my opinion. That said, I'm not looking to trade any of these guys, if that makes sense.
I found the trade, if you guys want to hear it.
Yeah.
So this is a 10-team Superflex PPR, okay? One side got Josh Allen, Tony Pollard, and Jamar. The other side got Drake London, Brian Thomas, RJ Harvey, and Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
That's the type of deal it would take.
I get it. I get it. That's the type of deal. There's two in the next tier. You're basically saying there's not a huge difference between Daniels and Josh Allen, and then on top of that, you're saying RJ Harvey is going to be a difference maker.
But it's just like, so in a 10-teamer, I get it. Like, I mean, when you're down to 10, you need true difference makers in your weekly roster to have a chance at a championship. But it's like, man, London and Thomas. Like strip all the other things away of just like Drake London and Brian Thomas Jr. for Jamar Chase, and now you have a difficult question right there.
The last little thought I want to bring up is Malik Neighbors is incredible. About to be 22 years old. Is he possibly on a Garrett Wilson trajectory of, and here's my point, he's going to see 150 to 170 targets every single year. And is the team going to be stuck in that same boat? I mean, I know it's New York. I'm making a comparison here. But there is Garrett Wilson has done everything he's needed to do from a target share perspective, which is the stickiest of stats. That's what we're going to care about. Target share at the end of the day. Betz and I joked last week, Mike, about how we have all these really cool metrics. At the end of the day, the stickiest ones are target share and targets.
Yeah.
So
Garrett Wilson has been over 1,000 yards.
Right.
Every year of his career.
If you got 150 to 170 targets, 1,000 plus receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns for the next 2 to 3 years, I think we'd be a little disappointed in Neighbors. Sadly.
You'd feel like you drafted Garrett Wilson, and you were so excited about year one and how you're like, I could see it getting so much better, and then it just kind of stayed pretty flat.
His value is going to be fine, though. That's just all the difference I'm bringing up is value-wise, he's going to continue to be in this tier for a long time. And yet, the production could be a little different in your leagues. And that's sad because some of these guys did take longer than you think. Like CeeDee Lamb took 3 years for us to really see the acceleration to him being I think he was wide receiver 6 that season, then wide receiver 1. So it takes a little bit more time than what we think, but super young, commands targets.
Look, I think projection wise and talking about just the player coming out of college, I would have had a much higher grade on Malik Neighbors than Garrett Wilson. I liked Wilson, but Neighbors seemed in a higher tier. But yeah, we are, and yet you always bet on talent. But I think the Garrett Wilson question is interesting because they put a lot of stock in Zach Wilson, and yeah, year 2 wasn't supposed to be Zach Wilson, but that's who we ended up getting, and the question becomes, what if Jackson Dart is like Zach Wilson? The odds of Dart ending up being a true franchise starter for the New York Giants, I feel like has to remain very low because it's very low for all prospects, and especially guys that you kind of traded up in the first round. So I think that's a fair thought to have, where we are, the fantasy football is probabilities and it's gray, and we get real binary sometimes with our superstars, who we believe our superstars are. So I think that is it's a fair doubt to at least pay attention to.
Yeah, the stat that Betz and I were talking through is that teams, for the most part, the first-round quarterbacks they take, it's about 48% of the time that they get a second contract with that team over the last 15 years. So, that's a real key indicator. Is this guy worth your team giving a franchise contract to in their second contract? And it's a 50-50 shot. It has been for the first-round dudes, and lower for the guys you pointed out, Mike, that they trade up for the end of the first. Let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about some more tiers. All right, the next guys that we're going to talk about, I'm calling it, maybe I'm cheating, tier 2A and 2B. I know I can make it 3, but I wanted to get to the top 12 wide receivers. And so this first group was who Betz mentioned. I'm calling locked, and the next one I'm calling loading, because the first group is Puka. I know.
That's good work, Kyle.
Puka, Brian Thomas Jr., Amon-Ra, Nico, and Drake London in that group. And then this next tier that's a fringe right there at wide receiver 1, but like they don't feel like a wide receiver 1, would be Marv, JSN, and Ladd McConkey. So Betz, why don't you start off first? That first group is like, I feel really confident, and I would be happy if they were my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty.
Yeah, definitely. And these are the guys like in a single quarterback league that if you miss out on the top, 4 guys that we just talked about in Jefferson, Chase, Neighbors, and Lamb, like these are still priority targets for me in startups. Like I would feel great building around any of these 5 names as your wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, still either like just entering their peak when you think about Puka at 24, Drake London at 24, or still in their prime. Amon-Ra St. Brown, not even 26 years old, Nico 26. Like there's no real age concerns here. These guys are all incredible on a per route basis. You really can't poke holes in many of these guys, or any of these guys, really, in my opinion. So yeah, I would feel really good about these guys in a startup. I think they're all worthy of kind of going in the back of the first in a single quarterback league, and I would feel confident taking them there. So yeah, just like the guys we mentioned previously, maybe they're not untouchable, but these are still some of the best names, obviously, in Dynasty.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out a way to bring up a counter argument for any of these guys. I mean, BTJ, you could say they added a wide receiver, 2nd overall pick. That's a big deal from target share, but I'm not really worried about him. He's stupid young. We all love Nico. I think Drake London is just going to see 150 plus targets. I mean, he was hyper targeted by Penix. So I don't know, Mike, anything you want to say about any of these guys?
Who, and maybe we don't have an answer for this off the top of mind. Who has been the best wide receiver that has played with Trevor Lawrence? But not like counting Brian Thomas Jr.
Like single season performance?
I mean, just like overall best player. Like when you think of the top wide receivers who have caught passes from Trevor Lawrence, who are we talking about?
Man, I have to go back and look at some rosters, but like off the top of my head,
that's what Christian I was saying. We may not have the answer.
Season 2 years ago is probably the best.
His rookie year was the GOAT, Marvin Jones Jr.
Who could forget?
Saw 120 targets that year. But then it's been Kirk. Zay Jones had a year where he just saw a ton of volume.
Yeah, he was spot start.
So I think it's been Kirk, and then last year obviously BTJ.
And I guess Ingram.
Yeah, among pass catchers.
So I bring that up for the question of, because the a fair thing to say about Brian Thomas Jr. is the end of season was no one was left on the roster. Like they were all hurt. And then it was Mac Jones, who was like, Mac Jones is, if like, this is all narrative and mentality, but if I'm Mac Jones, if I'm a backup quarterback and I go out with a team and I'm trying to earn another starting job somewhere, I'm going to unload every single target at my best player out there. And that's not something that franchise quarterbacks always do. You know what I mean? So it's just the question of, will Brian Thomas see that 30+% target share? Because he saw it from Mac Jones, and we don't have enough. We don't have the sample because Brian Thomas was a rookie at the beginning of the year, and that's when Trevor Lawrence played. So yes, I expect Thomas to get better at the end of the year. Like we have these cross-fading arguments where we have narratives that are just fighting against each other of the end of season. So it's, what do you truly believe about just Brian Thomas Jr., the player, I think. But that's where that would be the only thing. Like, and I'm hot and bothered. I got Brian Thomas at 5. So I'm not truly arguing against him. I'm trying to bring up just a safe space where we can have this conversation of, are we getting over our skis for Brian Thomas based off of the end of season, or was that Amon-Ra where we didn't get far enough. Like
Right.
we didn't even suit up the skis, and we wrote it off and said, let me see it one more year. And then if you wait one more year, then you're out. Then the price Bitcoins and you can't catch up to it. So where are you guys when you're trying to think of all of those things? Because I got my ranking, but where are you guys with Brian Thomas Jr.? Should we show any type of caution or just say screw it and we got to move this guy up?
I think the difference between Amon-Ra and Brian Thomas Jr., the pushback that a lot of people had about the concerns of the late rookie season insane run that he was on and projecting a year two I don't even want to say breakout because Brian Thomas Jr. is already broken out, but like the year two ascension, Amon-Ra was I believe, 4th round pick in the NFL draft.
Yeah, he was a
so he was
three.
not thought
he
of.
remembers.
He remembers every single. I love that now players are just doing that year over year. Like we've already done that. Let's move on. But
Will Howard this year is the like poster child where he in his interviews basically went full Amon-Ra.
Oh man,
and I'm like, dude, they don't think about you that way. The Steelers.
You know what a real elite player would do is memorize your draft, everyone who went in front of you, and then every single draft after, every wide receiver who gets picked before your number that you went, you got to memorize those guys too.
That is next
level. You got to
level.
have a super chip on your shoulder and just pretend that they got drafted in front of you.
There's just like random wide receivers from like 5 years later. Like, why are you mad at me, man? It's not my fault.
Meet him at a party. It's like, I know who you are.
I know everything about you. But the difference, obviously, with
you
Brian
went
Thomas,
to Wake Forest, you got drafted in front of me. You're like, dude, I was drafted 3 years later.
But the difference with Brian Thomas is like obviously he was drafted, to quote the great Jason Moore, to be great in the first round.
Yes.
So like he has that pedigree. So I'm not really worried about that kind of aspect and that range of outcomes. The other thing is like I think we're all big fans of him as a talent. And sometimes when you see coaching changes happen, you wonder, like, how is that guy going to incorporate a guy who's a superstar? I trust Liam Cohen. He has openly talked about, like, I mean, every presser. That's the best part of it.
You trust that guy?
How could you not? I mean, come on.
I trust that guy to scheme an offense.
I'm
it.
not a huge fan of...
Not to fix anything in my house.
Right. No, that's definitely not the case. But to scheme an offense to look at his team and be like, okay, who are the best players? Let's get those guys the ball, which is kind of crazy that you have to even like talk about that in the NFL, but we have to talk about that sometimes. Play callers don't prioritize that. I feel very strongly he will move the offense through Brian Thomas Jr. and prioritize him. And so I'm not really worried about a step back in year two, even though, like you said, the end of the year, you look around that wide receiver room, like who he was competing with targets was pretty laughable. So yeah, I guess there is a world that exists where Travis Hunter is just him and he plays exclusively wide receiver at some point in his career.
That's what I mean.
But I'd be surprised if it's such a drastic change that in hindsight you look back and you're like, oh man, I'm kind of bummed that I have Brian Thomas Jr. on my team. I'm disappointed. I'd be very surprised by that.
After the bye week, man, 35%. A 35% target share, which last year that would have, I mean, Malik Neighbors was at 34.9. So like, that was out. It was insane of when you would watch Giants games and you're like, oh, you need to give Neighbors a break, man. Throw it to someone else just for at least a couple plays. But like that is, Justin Jefferson's at 29%. Jamar Chase is at 28%. So 35 that's when he became a consistent superstar stud. And he was already a stud from the beginning of it, but it was more hot and cold because he's not seeing 35% of the targets.
We don't talk a lot about dominator rating for the NFL. We usually talk about it in prospecting season, but he would have been second in the NFL, 44% of the team's total, the receiving yards and touchdowns. So like 44%. Yeah, Malik was one because, they were throwing to Wandale. But I think my projection for Brian Thomas Jr. is that he ends up being CeeDee Lamb, where they move him more in the slot. Liam Cohen's talked about that a ton, of how they used him there, and they used him a ton in the screen game, like 17 targets behind the line of scrimmage. He averaged over 10 yards after the catch per reception, which is nuts stuff. So I think BTJ feels really, really safe. There are some variables. We also need to throw out the fact that Trevor Lawrence might not be that good.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff.
Now you're speaking my language, man.
So I love the way that you brought it up, Mike. You kind of like slowly raised your hand and you go, I'm not here to crap on BTJ. I love BTJ. Look at my rank. Look at all this stuff. But can we bring this up? And I think that's the discussion in Dynasty of all these guys who are top tier assets of saying, I just want to bring it up. I want to bring it up as an issue. So this next group is Marv.
So in that group, Puka, Brian Thomas, Amon-Ra, Nico, Drake, London. Do you think anyone can jump into Untouchable as we have the tier? Because obviously the prices are extraordinary high already for all of those guys. But do you think anyone's going to make the jump where you're like, oh man, I should have bought in before that? I know it was expensive, but now it costs even more.
I think it would be BTJ.
I'm surprised you didn't say Drake London, Kyle.
I love Drake London.
Because he knows it might be artificial.
Yeah, we can't.
Yeah,
trust
I don't want to say anything good.
Anything Kyle says about the Falcons.
Because it's going to be all terrible things.
I'm careful with how I say this. I'm skeptical that Michael Penix is the future, but the Falcons are making moves as if they know he is awesome. They don't have a first round pick next year. So they are riding this out.
Got to fake it till you make it, man.
With a 3 or 4 game sample, whatever it was. And there is a world that exists where he is, he's not the answer. There's also a world that exists where he's incredible and Drake London is seeing 160 targets year over year over year. With Penix, I don't think that's necessarily like the most likely outcome that Penix is incredible, but I think it's possible. And so if Drake London is as talented as we all think he is and what he's shown on a per out basis, and then he's just getting insane volume, I could see him in the next year or two kind of catapulting up a little bit. But I think BTJ is the most obvious answer.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at pure volume here. And so I agree with you. I didn't want to say his name to sound like a loser. But he could see 160 targets, right, of this group. I mean, a lot of these guys are target hogs, but I got to keep moving because we have some other names. It's Marv, JSN, Lad McConkey. Jason apparently hates Lad all of a sudden. He's by far the lowest. You need to talk to him when he gets in. I do think all three of these guys would terrify me if I'm counting on them as my 1 for my team. If they are your 2 or your 3, you feel awesome. But there are some scary, scary things. It's like scary things about what JSN is, which is like a PPR threat that saw 100 targets last year and 100 receptions. He could repeat it and still not be that valuable for your team. Marv, please give him a different route tree. Please, he was really good at crossers and they never gave him crossers and they gave him a ton of back shoulder fades that never worked. So, Mike, what do you want to say about these 3?
I would agree with that. I believe in Lad. I believe in what I saw on the field, and yeah, I get his biggest question to me is hard dog, G-Row, high T, and then they go and they spend a first round pick on a freaking running back. I mean, that's who they want to be. But in today's NFL, you can't just be that. I firmly believe that. So if you get the true number 1, and Trey Harris, nice prospect, huge, getting social media buzz yet again in the offseason. Look how awesome Huge is. I think Lad is a true number 1, but I get it. These are like wide receiver 1.5s where I'm not going to call him a 2. That's disrespectful. But if he's my 1, I'm a little nervous about it. So, I mean, of these guys, I'm most confident that the return of value who maintains, maybe even gets a little bit better, is Lad. The ceiling still belongs to Marv, though. If Marv actually makes the jump, then if Marv has a great year, he'll be in that untouchable tier by next year.
How likely do you think it is that the new, or I shouldn't say new scheme, it's the same play call and everything. Yeah. Do you think that they change it up or just hope he improves in the role that he was in last year? Because what made Trey McBride so incredible was Marv was kind of just running clear out stuff, and Trey McBride was the go-to guy underneath. Do you think they give him more of those layups, or what's your temperature on him?
My temperature is yes. They will look at last year and and try to adjust some things. And on top of that was a just clear him and Kyler, whatever that little, like the Adams Rodgers, to quote the best one, the magic, the mind meld, they did not have it. They were just slightly out of sync. And because of what I believe in Marv, and I think, and Kyler, my opinion on him changes all the time, just like everybody else. But I think the truth about Kyler is he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. Is he a true franchise Super Bowl winner? That's a different question, but he's a starter caliber who can throw a very accurate pass, despite some of the shortcomings. So I think that I don't know if we get the year that moves Marv up into the untouchable category, but I think he maintains value, probably moves up into that loading category that Kyle has named.
Yeah. I mean, it took Adams and Rodgers 3 years to develop that back shoulder thing.
Yes.
Remember how
forget.
bad Adams was. A year in, terrible. Second year, still bad.
He was a catastrophic bust of an NFL player those first 2 years.
Yes. So,
and now he's Hall of Fame.
You're happy, though, with these players in rebuilding season. So Jeremy and I were rebuilding. We have Marv and JSN on our team. We don't view them either as R1 because we have Puka, but it's like they're 1.5. So I like the way that you defined it there, Mike. This next tier, I'm calling a range of studs because these are all guys that have either been in that conversation for wide receiver 1. They're more in Dynasty top 15 to 20. Some veterans here, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins. Devonta Smith is in this tier. And then some young names, that's the ones I want to talk about here. It's T-Mac, Tedero McMillan, Travis Hunter, and Rashee Rice at the very end of this tier, and I feel scared. I think you two are much more bullish on Rice moving forward.
Just believe, man.
Kyle hates fantasy points.
I like... Yeah, they don't matter that much, man. It's target
fantasy
share.
Fantasy points?
They mean
target share.
They mean nothing in this game. I mean,
you want to talk about target share? You want to pull up Rashee's target share?
I can pull every single stat for Rashee Rice. I just think there's a lot more variables instead of crowning him the wide receiver 1 for the Chiefs long term.
He's sitting at 35% in those first 3 games, just like the insanity of Brian Thomas.
Those 3 games from the start of 2024 is like the main crux of the argument, and I get it because I watched it, and the scary part that I brought up to Betz before is that 68% of his career yards are after the catch. He has to be an outlier the rest of his career. The only other guys around that are like Rondale, Greg Dortch. It's like all the dudes that
Debo anywhere close.
Debo's the only name in this list.
Hey, we get a Debo every once in a while.
You basically have to be Debo. And he can be that. I just think at the end of the day, he will have to diversify a little bit how he's used. The NFL isn't just going to look at Rashee Rice and be like, keep running that same route. We're going to let you do it. They will change over time. But Rice aside, I think my question is about T-Mac or Travis Hunter. We have them right here. People probably went back and forth about their takes in rookie drafts. Who do you think will be more valuable in 2026? And I know that's a big question. They're in the same tier. They're basically the same age. Both top 10 wide receivers. So, Betz, who do you think will be more valuable next year? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot. It's a definitive answer you got to get.
I was going to say, this is impossible to answer because I will choose one and then regret it immediately. I think it's Tedero McMillan just for the simple fact of one guy is not competing with Brian Thomas Jr. for targets in this offense. And Tedero McMillan, I think there was a lot of fun on him kind of leading up to the NFL draft about the work ethic stuff and the stuff that always comes up every draft cycle. But it's like, this was the 8th overall pick in the NFL draft. We like Canales, TBD on Bryce Young, but like at least can pepper his number 1 option with targets and be productive. And he, for like a bigger body wide receiver, he's actually, in my opinion, most successful like over the middle of the field on like true NFL type routes, not just go balls and stuff like that. So if there's any kind of pairing type of thing that Bryce Young I think does okay in the NFL, it's that. And so I think Tedero McMillan can see a ton of volume and truly be like a legit alpha for his team. So not that Hunter can't, it's just, I mean, we're talking about competing with an undrafted guy in Jalen Coker, Leggett, who's I think a fine wide receiver 2/3 in the NFL, probably not a true number 1. and obviously Adam Thielen, who's now 40 years old. So I think it's Cedric McMillan. I was waiting for it, Mike, over Travis Hunter for me, but I totally get anybody that says Hunter.
Mike's the only 40 plus on this pod right now.
Him and Adam Thielen.
Mike, who do you think sees more targets this year, Hunter or McMillan?
I think McMillan sees more because obviously Brian Thomas Jr. has to see at least 35% of the Trevor Lawrence targets. Dude, the conversation on Travis Hunter is it's so difficult. Like the DB thing is it honestly screws everything up. When we're talking from the fantasy football perspective, I'm not talking about Travis Hunter, the NFL player. I'm saying for us to figure it out, you spent that whole offseason of he is like, I'm playing both ways, like the quotes of not obviously hyperbolic, but him saying essentially like, I play both ways or I'm not going to play, like because it's just, that's my passion. I want to do it. And so he gets a Heisman. And then if Travis Hunter is not this a college type of player that we really haven't seen, where he plays every single snap on both sides of the ball, does he become the number 2 pick overall? Like if he's just Travis Hunter, the wide receiver, who is a really good player, then what happens? So just saying because of us in the fantasy football, all we care about is offense. So he just is so difficult to gauge. And we're all betting on we're betting on the talent, but it's all go listen to the Brian Thomas argument. Just rewind a little bit, which then turns into the Trevor Lawrence. Can Trevor Lawrence actually get it done for his top option, let alone a secondary option? So that would be the concern for me is can Trevor Lawrence can Cohen turn Lawrence into a quarterback that we truly trust and gives us 2 options each and every week?
That's the conversation for me. And because he is a unicorn, his value will be sustained even if he gets injured, even if, he's just okay. There will be a what could be still with him, no matter what he does in year 1. And because he's such a special player and because we get the type of draft capital and because the Jaguars are now kind of seen as this, whoa, this team is going a different direction. They went all in on this player. Look at their new GM. So there's enough here that if you have him on your team, you're going to be fine no matter what he does value-wise. But I think McMillan's the bet to say who's going to have more targets, who's going to have more receiving yards, who could see more touchdowns. And I'm scared with Lawrence. He is a first read only thrower. It's like him and Tua were the dudes, and then it was like Levis last year, where all the guys like, okay, I know where I'm throwing the ball. That just scares me. But you kind of have to have a lot of faith in Liam Cohen moving forward. Let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about a bunch more wide receivers. We are entering tier 4, and I don't know why, but I just said, can these guys be a top 15 wide receiver? ? I don't know where I stand on some of these players because they're all really good assets to have in Dynasty, but there's some question marks of what direction are they moving. So 2 of the Bears wide receivers are here, Odunze and DJ Moore, which I think is where we're going to center our conversation. But Xavier Worthy is just a couple spots below Rice, and he's in this tier. Zay Flowers feels like you kind of have to put him here, but he doesn't feel like there's much upside moving forward for me. Jordan Addison's been really good in the touchdown department, but kind of scary. Jalen Waddle, I would love to grab him from this tier and have as my wide receiver 3 on my team, but you're nervous. Chris Olave, I'll cry myself to sleep every single night. My pillow is just tear stained because of Chris Olave. And then some other guys, but I think the Bears guys are the ones that we need to figure out who they are moving forward. Odunze gets kind of a free pass, and yet we're expecting him to kind of make this jump in year 2 with Ben Johnson. So, Betz, where do you stand on these Bears wide receivers? Because DJ Moore is just still solid and only 28 years old.
Yeah, it's a difficult group to kind of think about for this year because obviously everybody's excited about what could be with Ben Johnson, and Caleb obviously has the pedigree from college and all those things. But it's a little bit confusing kind of what they did in the NFL draft and kind of maybe trying to figure out what that means for these guys moving forward. Like NFL offenses, usually if they have guys in house that they like or they trust, are not spending elite top tier draft capital on additional weapons. But, Colson Loveland 10th overall, they took Luther Burden early in the second round. And because of those two things, now we're all like, what does this mean for the Bears moving forward? And when I think about like DJ Moore last year, he had the insane season with Justin Fields a few years ago. And then last year it was kind of a mixed bag. And then when he had his good games, a lot of it was on screens and just run after the catch type stuff where they just made life way easier on Caleb. He led the NFL in targets that were on screens, 39 of those, and led on catches, 38 of those last year. So my reason for bringing that up is like, if he doesn't see that same volume because Rome takes a year or two leap, or Luther Burden gets on the field and he's seeing a lot of those targets because he's Ben Johnson's guy, I find a lot of paths where DJ Moore right now in projections and everything looks really good. And then at the end of the season, we're like, oh man, he kind of fell off a little bit. Now we're talking about him next year and he's 29 years old. And it's kind of a confusing situation for Dynasty. So I'm just kind of confused on the overlap here with how these guys operate. Remember with Luther Burden, one of the big knocks in his profile coming out was like, he had that awesome year 2 seasons ago and then took a step back this year. But a lot of his looks were at the line of scrimmage. And people are wondering how much of a real NFL route tree can he run is kind of the knock on him. But then you look at all the Loveland stuff and everything out of Ben Johnson's mouth is like, let's make life easier on Caleb. Let's get the ball out quick and let's bring his ADOT down for Loveland over the middle of the field. So these guys are so hard to kind of forecast moving forward that I find myself just like stuck on all of these guys, including the rookies with Burden and Colston Loveland. Do you guys have any takes on DJ Moore's outlook for this year and beyond?
I would say my take between the Rome and DJ Moore, I'm betting on the DJ Moore side of, I know that he's a good wide receiver. The Bears are committed to him. Like, didn't they just, what was this last year?
Previous
gave
year,
him they gave him a big bag of money. And Rome is extremely difficult. He's the one I have the reservations about. But that also is just, I'm confirming my priors of, I had some reservations about him being considered, among the elites back when he was a prospect, of like guys who are there when your calling card is a go and then contested catch winning in college. Like that to me is more of a red flag. That's not to say that can't ever work out as a profile coming into the NFL. But I have my concerns then of things have to go so right for you. And, it appears that Rome in his contested catches was strong and, came down with a good percentage of them. But, we saw so much of him being not on the same page as Caleb, a similar Marv situation. So perhaps that gets remedied. But I know DJ Moore is a good wide receiver. So that's why between the two of them, I will bet on him.
Yeah, the 2025 projections of statting out all the teams, it's really hard to say Odunze is going to jump ahead of Moore for target share, for overall fantasy production. You really have to make that leap. And I'm guilty of looking at Odunze and thinking all those good feelings I had of like, man, this guy's a top 10 wide receiver. He was in that same group with Marv and Malik. And then looking at this season, and I'm still just guessing like, oh, maybe he has the year where his contested catch is good. He does catch a lot of them. Or he turns into the Jameson Williams of this team, the way that Ben Johnson used Jameson down the field, and it worked. And yet you're getting like these huge yards per reception type projections you need. That's what you need for Rome. You need him to be a 15 per catch. You need him to be like Pickens and yet still be efficient. And it's like you're still doing a lot of projection there. So I agree for 2025. I think for Rome, I just hate that we added all these pieces, and when we're projecting, we're still having you can look at your projections, Mike, but it's like you have to give Cole Kmet some targets. You have to give, Luther Burden. You have to give Swift out of the backfield. You have to give Roschon Johnson. It's like you start spreading those out, and then on top of that, you also need Caleb to be efficient and not have one of the worst like off target rates in the league. Magically, all of a sudden, it has to be good. So There's a
offensive
lot of
line
projection.
really helps that out. So, I feel more confident that we will get the production from the Chicago Bears. It is a new regime. When you have your opinions about a player and your hopes and your dreams about a breakout, and the new regime comes in and they say, these are my guys, it is troubling. It's red flag stuff.
All right, this next tier, and I didn't mention the bottom of this tier, you can find everything in the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus. You can go on the app, you can see all of the guys' rankings, but McLaurin, Egbuka, Jameson Williams were all there at the end of this tier. So we're kind of at wide receiver 30 range here. 30 through 38 is what I'm seeing next, but some older guys that I'm calling, are we in or are we out on these guys? It's Metcalf, Judy, Pickens. This is where Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans are, which is, who knows? You got to put them somewhere. You can't just abandon them because they're old.
Yeah.
And then the interesting part in our rankings is we have Matthew Golden and Jaden Reed in this tier, and then Ayuk and Pearsall. So we have some teammates that were like, I don't know which one. I wanted to focus on the Packers guys because Jaden Reed this offseason has made some headlines of like, hey, do you guys really believe in me? And that there's this conversation of like, hey, we really like you. Like, oh, okay. This is the conversation that they're having, but it's public, which is weird. And yet they draft a player in the first round who has a weird profile. When we look at every player, every first round wide receiver, he's among a group, when you look at yards per team pass attempt, of guys you're like, okay, you had an interesting role in college. First round wide receiver since 2014 to have this low of a yards per team pass attempt. Mike Williams, Xavier Worthy, Henry Ruggs, Matthew Golden, Jalen Reagor. Interesting
Nothing
players.
to worry about.
Totally fine.
Should be totally fine. And that's just one statistic. And obviously Worthy can be used in a bunch of different ways. But how are you, like, which wide receiver would you rather have in Dynasty? Reed or Golden? Reed's going into year 3. It's Reed easy for me.
It's not. So I guess for me, I wasn't high on Matthew Golden as a prospect. But Jaden Reed through 2 years has, I think, done incredibly well on the routes he has given. The question you have to ask yourself is, will he ever turn into an every down player?
He will not.
And if he's not going to be, he's tough to put in your starting lineup. At least with Matthew Golden, like, this could go great or terribly. Like I think he's being drafted to be or could turn into a legit every down player, especially given the context of the team, right? With Romeo Doubs in a contract year and Christian Watson off the ACL and all those things. Like, I think that there's a chance he could develop into that as a first round NFL talent. With Jaden Reed, coming out of school, he wasn't really ever billed as that. He's great at what he does, but man, he's like the most frustrating guy to have in Dynasty because he's talented, but there are going to be games where he's running like 18 routes, and you can't start that in fantasy, right? So I think for me, I just shoot for the upside with Golden, even though I think the probability of that hitting is pretty low, in my opinion.
You love Matthew Golden. That's what I heard.
Great first name.
Mike,
nice.
Who would you be taking?
Between the two of them, I would take the shot on Matthew Golden as well. I will whisper as quiet as I can with a microphone. The snap percentage went up for Reed last year, but between that and his rookie season, but like, it would strike me as strange, not impossible, but strange if going into year 3 with as much credit as we give the Green Bay Packers coaching of like, I think those guys know what they're doing, and they have now seen him for 2 complete years. It would be wild then to see that that as a true change of, they say, oh no, Jaden Reed, you have grown into being an outside guy. I mean, when he's smaller, he's 5'11", he's like a 190 type of a player. It can happen, that type of that size, and where they become the true number one guy. But I feel frequently like I'm the only Romeo Doubs stan on this entire staff
on the planet.
You are.
And who plays all the snaps? Like, who does the coach trust more? I know that the Jaden Reed is the sexy stuff, but someone has to be out there all the time, and they say this is going to be Romeo Doubs. So I think I would take the unknown. I'll find out if Matthew Golden's a boat.
Yes, I get the appeal. With Reed, he ran 3 fewer routes per game last year than the year before. So, yes.
Considering
Christian Watson,
sorry to cut you off. Considering Christian Watson tore his ACL and that still happened is weird.
Yes, and then, there's context. I brought up so many anti-Reed stats. Mike and I have been, for a couple of years, bringing up like, hey, he's just not on the field. He ran 5 routes last year with 2 wide receivers on the field. 5 total routes. He saw 0 targets. But if you look at what he is, put it this way, does he see a second contract with the Packers? We're making a guess right now because he's entering year 3.
I will say, oh man, I mean, you have to go through the whole depth chart and guess, are they going to get a contract? Like, do they re-sign Dobbs? Do they bring him back? I guess the Dontavian Wicks, that feels like it is taking a massive step back after last year. So I will say, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that there's a reason that the conversations that Jaden Reed had with the team, there is a reason those went out into the public sphere.
Because he's a wide receiver, and that's how wide receivers talk?
Yes, but I'm saying that he could have made the decision to be completely private about that. Or if I'm Jaden Reed and I go out there and I play and I maximize everything that I do, and the Packers fall short or something like that, then I go, wasn't my fault, guys. Look, I talked to them. I wanted to be the number 1 wide receiver, and they told me I was, and then they didn't use me like that, so it's not my fault. I mean, that would be a very wide receiver thing to do.
Yeah, wasn't it? It was like a Shefty tweet that like said Reed has met with the team and they have told him he's still their wide receiver 1 or something that was like very like doesn't mean anything, basically.
It's weird.
I don't know, man.
It feels like posturing.
It does, and kind of like prepping for it. He'll be entering year 3, right, this season?
Yes.
So you're thinking about that contract-wise, like he'll be 27 when he's due for another deal.
But traditionally, if you're one of those receivers that is valuable, you get to negotiate between year 3 and 4.
Yeah.
I can't see them signing him to a super long-term deal if they do.
Okay. I think he does get an extension. I would be approaching it that way. If he's not, if he could get injured and then it's not a big deal. It doesn't happen. But I think he's valuable to the team and valuable as a playmaker enough that, yes, he's frustrating to start. But in a double flex league, I want players like this attached to a really good offense. And I think he could be their 1, even if the target share is lower than you want it to be. All right, here's my wrap-up question. To finish this off, you can find all these rankings. I went through, and I just called this last tier a bunch of dudes, because there's a bunch of dudes here. There's like 10 that I wanted to wrap up and get to a solid 50. But the 2 that stood out to me as very similar players is Josh Downs and Khalil Shakir in this group. There's a bunch of other rookies in here. Higgins is in here, Trey Harris, Luther Burden, Jack Besh, who might be moving down. But I think
you got to hold, man.
I am.
Come on.
I said might. He could
hold.
be.
This Thornton stuff is nonsense.
Shakir and Downs is an interesting discussion because they're basically the same players, right? 75% of their snaps are going to be in the slot. They operate in the same thing. Can you guys tell me the highest fantasy finish on a season these 2 have had? So Shakir's played 3 years and Downs has played 2 years. So final at the end of the season. Yeah. How high have these guys finished? What's the highest between them?
Well, Downs missed games last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Man, did Shakir? I don't remember.
I think Shakir missed like 2 with an ankle injury, but he was healthy for most of the year.
I mean, I would guess the highest finish for Shakir is like 32, 33.
I was going to guess 27.
It is 38.
Wow.
That's what Shakir.
Half PPR.
I think, yes. I think these guys are valued for soaking up targets, and yet over the course of their careers have not given you any type of ceiling, which is kind of wild with Shakir. He hasn't had a 20-point game yet in half PPR. That's kind of shocking to me. Downs is crushing. Mike's talked him up a little bit on the main show of just, he's used like a wide receiver one, and he could continue to be that type of player, and he's undervalued. So between these two guys, Shakir, who just got a contract extension, and Downs, who has a lot of variables about his quarterback, which of these players would you rather have in full PPR moving forward, Shakir or Downs?
I would probably prefer Downs. I think he's the better NFL wide receiver. Although, I mean, it's kind of sketchy when you're like, I'm taking a wide receiver from Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, and some quarterback that probably is going to be starting next year over Josh Allen. Seems a little sketchy, but I think the talent with Downs provides a higher ceiling.
Mike?
Yeah, I kind of lean that way as well. I like Shakir. I think he's useful for, a flex spot, a wide receiver 3, and he got the bag. So he is absolutely tied in. But they're both similar players. Like, I mean, who's running? Kyle, do you have who's routes? Who's running more routes between? Put Jaden Reed in with these guys.
So Shakir ran 361 routes last year. Downs ran 351. And then I'd have to look at how many Reed was at.
No, you don't have it in front of you. Okay.
I don't have it right in front of me, but I think they are fantasy players that gain a lot of notoriety, and yet they haven't been difference makers. They've been fine as a flex so far. I just wanted to point that out because I love the advanced stats. And then when I looked at what did they do in the last 2 years, Keenan Allen has more games of double digits the last 2 years. Had to bring that up. Adam Thielen has more games. DeAndre Hopkins has more games of double digits.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Hopkins?
Yes.
That's the thing that's so tough about half PPR with these guys, especially Shakir, right? It's 5 catches for 60 yards weekly feels good from a projection standpoint and production, but that's not really helping you in half PPR, right? You need touchdown scores, and it's hard to predict touchdowns, so we don't want to get over our skis on that type of thing. But these guys do not profile as half PPR difference makers. In full PPR, they are fine. I think floor plays for the flex, but unless you're scoring touchdowns, man, that's tough to make a jump.
Yeah, Shakir's the trivia answer of which wide receiver for the MVP finished the lowest. And it's this guy was the wide receiver 38 for a guy who was league MVP. That's the best, some of the best Josh Allen seasons. And this is what you're getting. I feel like there could be more, and in full PPR, it's a little bit higher. I think we're waiting. So I would take Downs from a pure, I think he's a better talent. And yes, is Daniel Jones their quarterback next year? I'd say no. I'd say Shane Steichen's out. But he's still going to be good.
That seems most likely.
Dude, they're going to be in such a tough spot if they are able to win 9 games and they show a little bit of fight and promise, and then they aren't picking high enough
in the 9.
Maybe. And they're not picking high enough in the draft, and they're you know what?
Yep.
Let's just sign Daniel Jones to a 2-year deal and be stuck in mediocrity forever.
That sounds like what the Cardinals and Falcons always do. About right there. About 8-9, and it doesn't work out very well. We are going to keep talking Dynasty tiers all summer long. Next week, we'll be talking a lot about running backs. We'll talk about some Superflex tiers, and we will be moving on. Make sure you check out all the rankings, ultimatedraftkit.com, and check out the app. Scroll on the toilet. Do your thing.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.